Okay, you guys, thank you for coming. Like I said before, even if it was one person to walk in this building, we were still gonna make this happen. Y'all are here today. Again, welcome. I am the executive director of the Nurturing Group. If you have not heard of our organization, we do youth mentoring, parenting classes, and we focus on individuals who have been um, affected by domestic violence or sexual assault, who have dealt with that type of trauma. So we're here today to discuss domestic violence, and it touches my heart for two reasons. One, I am a survivor, and also I lost somebody to domestic violence, and she was the inspiration to do this. Her mother is here today. Thank you for coming. Her name is Antoinette Hill, and that's where the name of our program, Safety Net, came from because her nickname was Net. And so from there, she was taken through a domestic violence situation. And one of the main things that happened was she was told by law enforcement that she had to give somebody 30 days to leave, give them an eviction notice. That is a law. The laws in the area need to change. And so she didn't make that 30 days. Am I correct? So it's some different things in our area that need to change. There's some things that people don't even know about, laws that are on the books that people don't know about. For example, in Pickens, it's still lawful for a man to hit a to beat his wife, and it's a law on the books. That even though it's something that they don't enforce, it's still there, and it needs to go away. So one of the main things that we're here to talk about is how what domestic violence really is. So I got these wonderful people up here to tell what they feel like domestic violence is to them. And I'm going to ask him first because her face is something different. What do you feel like domestic violence is to you, sir?
Can y'all hear me okay? I mean, domestic violence just being directly is violence in the home, violence from someone close to you, violence from someone that you really wouldn't expect it to come from. Like, we don't walk around expecting violence or to be the receiving end on it from anyone. But typically, when we're talking about domestic violence situations, we're typically looking at situations that's happening in the home. And the first thought is to look at the physicality of it because that's where the worst situations are that I see going on. And I know typically women, that's what women are typically more subject to, while a lot more times you'll see men being subjected to the emotional and the mental violence that comes with it as a form of domestic violence as well. But also recognizing both men and women are going to have similarities because even the women that are victims to it, you're not going to have your body in captivity unless your mind is first in captivity as well. So there's going to be similarities between both male and females with the mental components that go with domestic violence. But I recognize that for women, it's a tough situation. It's a tough situation because I know the threat of harm is much stronger in a situation like that, and my heart goes out for that in the situation with your family member. I'm so sorry to hear that, but
I actually agree with Kenneth over there about domestic violence. One thing that I've learned is I always thought that domestic violence was just physical violence. I've since learned that it includes the psychological abuse as well as emotional abuse, and that's something that's not often spoken about. Um, but yeah, that's what domestic violence is for me. It takes place in the home. It can be spouse against spouse or significant other. It could be parents against kids, kids against parents. It could be the emotional abuse, the psychological abuse as well.
And I will say one thing that they did not mention that is part of domestic violence in my mindset. Some people might disagree. Financial abuse also. When you're in a house, when a home, when somebody is completely taking over what the finances are, what can be done, what cannot be done, even though you might be part of the breadwinner, process as well, financial can be a physical, a part of abuse and not just physical. So he touched on the fact on the gender part of it. What are your thoughts when it comes to how do you feel like men can be in a domestic violence situation as harshly as women can
Oh, absolutely. So here's my transparent moment. In my relationships, I was 85% of the time the aggressive one. I was the one that was perpetrating the domestic violence, and I didn't see it as that. Just because that's the way I grew up. There was a lot of fighting in my environment, so for me, it was just natural to get into argument and start swinging. And it wasn't until towards the end of one relationship that I realized, actually, when I started going through therapy, that I realized that I had been a perpetrator of domestic violence for years. And my significant other suffered in silence because for women it's embarrassing. So I can only imagine how much more embarrassing it would have been for a man to let someone know that they were being abused by a woman in their home.
be? And since you already talked about how it affects genders, I do want to ask you on another note. You work with kids on a regular basis. You do Adulting 101 as, as part of your nonprofit. How do you feel like domestic violence, or have you experienced where domestic violence has affected the children in the household?
One of the things I've had the pleasure of working with kids from all ages and all demographics, all background. And one of the things that's constant in children, children are supposed to be happy. Children are supposed to be running around. Children are supposed to be smiling. Children are supposed to be moving about carefree. And when I come around children that don't emulate that, I know there's a problem in the home without a question. I don't care how much they try and hide it. And I recognize, sometimes there's, some kids have a personality where they're not going to be outgoing. But in general, when I don't see happy children, I know there's a problem in the home. And there's a lot of times people might think that, oh, because I'm being abusive towards my spouse or the partner or the parent of the child, and I'm not directly hurting the child, that is not a bad thing and it's not hurting them. But one of the things that really disrupts the psychological development, the safety, the emotional and mental and internal security of a child is for them not to have a solid foundation at home. And kids, they might not be able to articulate it with the words that we put with it, but they feel it. They know love. They know pain. They know hurt. They might not can explain it, but they feel it and they know it. And if there's that violence in the home, if there's domestic violence, there's going to be a whole bunch of things that come with it. A lot of hopelessness, a lot of talking down. Those kids are going to hear that. There's no way that if a kid is looking at their mother or father who they love and they're watching the other one tear that person down, they're not thinking that's a part of them that's being torn down too. No matter how you explain it, kids are going to feel it that way. So I don't care what it is not you in general, but I don't care what it is a person might think. I might be being mean or hurtful or perpetuating this violence towards my partner and not pouring it out on my children. It doesn't matter. They're in the environment. They're in the atmosphere. They're going to soak it up. They're not going to feel safe. They're not going to feel comfortable. Then sometimes we wonder why we get some older children and they have a problem with authority. There's some connectivity in that. We wonder why they don't feel safe. Half the time when I encounter bad kids, they're not that, some of them, not all of them, some of them aren't that bad with me because if you take the time to listen to them and give them a safe environment, the nurturing group, you give them some nurturing around that, it helps soften and open them up. And there's not going to be nurturing in a home with domestic violence. Thank
Now, Mr. Harris is one of the most transparent people I know. So I'm going to ask you, how do you feel like your domestic violence situation affected your children, especially that little bitty one?
So the little bitty one,
It's your size now.
right, my son, she didn't see it as much. The one that it really affected was the middle one, and I didn't realize that until um, there was a situation taking place where there was an argument in the house, and my middle child was my son, and he grabbed my baby girl and he took her out the house and took her across the street to the neighbor's house, and he came back and he said, "I refuse to let my sister witness this." And that's when I knew that it was really affecting him because he had never said anything. And I honestly, I don't know why I didn't think the kids would hear me. You know, I'm throwing bicycles down the hallway and snatching ceiling fans off and stuff. So I don't know why I thought the kids were completely oblivious to that. But they heard it, and they saw things being thrown through the house. And so it really affected them. And so my older two deal with a lot of anxiety. Aggression, people pleasing, because, and I know now that that came from what they witnessed in our home.
Okay, so basically, apparently, a lot of things need to change. A lot of things need to change. We want to touch more on some different topics, but the main thing is this is one thing that drives me. And the last thing that we talked about, I am so passionate about the kids because the kids grow into, what our future is going to be. Because just because it's their future, they're making decisions about our future. And if we don't learn how to nurture and develop them into positive, you know, well behaved adults, just look to what we would have to deal with when they're the ones making the choices. So at this point, I really want some feedback from you guys to know what do you think needs to change in the community in order to lower the domestic violence rates, because that's one thing I didn't mention. South Carolina is number 6 in the nation, in the country. South Carolina is number 6 in the country for domestic violence rates. Now, I've been saying number 4 simply because we are tied with 2 other states. We're at 42%, and 2 other states are at 42% as well. So we're listed as number 6 just because they're at like 0.2 or 0.3. But that's not a good number. There has to be some things that can change in the community to help change that number. One of the things that y'all's donations are going towards is we're trying to take a political route to it. We got plenty of advocacy groups. We have plenty of support groups. These different things. But what are we as voters doing to help the lawmakers make changes? The law that allowed for Ms. Antoinette Hill to go home, have to give someone a 30-day notice to be removed from her home, and then he kills her and kills himself. That should not be a law. And they don't change it if we as voters don't take steps in order to vote in the right people. That's one of my suggestions. But anybody in the audience, do you have any suggestions as far as what we can do to lower our domestic violence rate? Any suggestions? Don't be afraid. Yes, ma'am. 1 second.
All right. I suggest we have in our community where
Can everyone hear her?
we have in our community that has been for years where what goes on in the house stays in the house.
Oh.
That's not true. Everybody knows when something starts going on at the house across the street, they get the rumbling and the tumbling and the cussing and the fighting, and it just kills on outside. And then it goes to the point where some neighbors will say, girl, I ain't getting involved with that because that ain't my problem. It's your problem because it's in your. And so I think that it's more of I am my brother or my sister instead of
Mama brother,
that ain't none of my business. Because what if that person showed up on your doorstep in the middle of the night, bloody, they've been bad and beat. What are you gonna do? Look through your peephole and I ain't doing that. Somebody else do it. No. Because if, first of all, you call yourself a child of God, you're supposed to help one another begin with, not just turn blind eye to it. So, Flores trying to get the word out there and to make sure our politicians pay starts first of all with yourself. It's not about sweeping around your own front door and cases like that. It's, if this was me, this was happening to me. If somebody in my neighborhood look out for me, have my back, help me, call the cops or call somebody to come help me, or would they turn next year like you're doing? So before it can go to higher levels, it has to start within the community first. Because politicians are not going to help us change the law so they're like, oh, you know, the community over there, they don't play. They don't allow such and such to go on in there. So, and it's no longer, it's not a black or white issue. It's everybody. It's not a male, female. It's an everybody. So, starting in the community first, our own community first, and practicing what we preach is where it starts. Um, Last thing is, a lot of people don't know that there's a very old law on the South Carolina books that is still considered active, and that's it's okay to keep a child on Sunday on a house on the state house ground, which was brought about way back in the 1780s. So today, why would we still have this outdated law that should have never been established in the beginning? So until we start policing our own community and helping one another within our own community, then how do we expect for our politicians?
Thank you so much. And can you stand back up and give us your name, please?
I'm Cadet Richardson.
Thank you. And I do want to speak on something she said. Yeah, we've always had the saying, what goes on in this house stays in this house. But there's also another thing that's basically almost a curse word in our community. It's a curse phrase, mental health. I like when Ms. Harris said when she got therapy. Things started surfacing when she got therapy. I like the fact that my pastor, Little Jones, encourages therapy. Yeah, you can come and talk to him. However, if you need to seek professional help, he encourages healthy mental behavior, healthy mental health. We go and we get our heart checked. We go in and we get, blood pressure, diabetes, all of this stuff is being checked and kept healthy. Are you keeping your mental health healthy? And sometimes that is what gets you out of situations you shouldn't be in, or that is even what stops you from perpetrating a situation that you're doing. So mental health in our community has been, hey, part of that, what goes on in this house stays in this house. And so that's another thing that we can definitely participate in. And you'd be surprised at how things can change if you just go and sit with somebody who has zero expectations of you. Because sometimes you cannot go sit and talk to mom. You cannot go sit and talk to your dad. You might want to tell your sister everything on the phone, 2 o'clock in the morning while she's working and you working. But then sometimes there's still expectations, and you don't want to tell them because you don't want them to look at you as being weak or dependent. But then when you go and talk to somebody who has none of those expectations of you, not judging you or anything, you would be surprised at how it can lighten the load that you feel like you're carrying. So again, like she said, the community actually starting with us and going into the community and making sure we make a difference. I see all of the faces that are here now as we move forward with this domestic violence cause. I'm expecting to see all of y'all's faces because y'all were just that concerned to give me your Saturday morning, and I appreciate every last one of you. The way that this actually ties into my organization is we focus on people who have dealt with this trauma. And you have to be able to parent through domestic violence. If you lost somebody, you have to be able to parent through that loss. If you have other, if that person had children, you have to now parent them. We also do mentoring because if these kids, like with Mr. Page, he's dealing with kids. And so I'm going to ask you, if you do have a kid that comes to you and says, hey, last night I don't know what to do. Last night my dad punched my mom in the face. I'm saying a little harsh, but
No.
Mr. Page, last night my dad punched my mom in the face. I don't know what to do. What should I do?
The first thing I would tell a kid, one, it would depend on which capacity they came to me in. Did they come to me while I was at school? Did they come to me while I was at church? If it's a part of an organization, I'm going to alert the head of the organization because I have to recognize that all I have is brute strength. I can't run up in there and demand it to stop. There's a set of steps and things that need to take place. So it's about me alerting the proper people who can do something about it. And that's the best thing. Sometimes your involvement in the community doesn't need to be you trying to make it stop. You can aid a lot in providing a way of escape. I believe in any situation, if someone is actively the victim of domestic violence, the biggest thing that they need is a place to escape. They need a place to get away. I think about the situation that you speak of, the young lady who had to go back home. I would have told her, get out, get away, escape, get away. I don't care what the laws say. I don't care if it's your house. The bank, it'll take them about 5 months for them to foreclose on it. Get out, escape. And if we're talking about helping in the community, now, if it's someone down the street, I'm going to tell them, come stay with me. Because I've been in situations where I've had family, they're not family. They were close friends and the mother and father have an issue and we had it set up. They had 3 kids, come to my house. Don't ask no questions. You knock on my door and this happened multiple times. You knock on my door 1:30 in the morning, come on in. Y'all need to stay tonight. It's okay. You got to provide a way out. Now, when it came to them adults, not to get in that situation, they had to work their own stuff out. But if I'm there to help out the children, that was my place for them. And then even having a direct conversation with those parents, I'd rather them be with me, inconvenience me, and send them to my house before you let them see all of that stuff, because that's not healthy for them. And that provides a way. But you being in the community, what will you do? What is your place? Are you willing to, like I said, you don't have to jump in and solve it. You just have to be willing to alert the proper people. And then also, if I may add one more thing, also, if I can add, learning how to, and this is for all of us, learning how to process our anger. Because we'll sit here in this forum talking about domestic violence and agree on all of these points. But when you go back home And I'm not saying you're a victim of this or you're a victimizer of it, but how do you handle yourself when you're angry? How do you respond to people when they disappoint you? How do you respond to people when they let you down? How do you hold yourself accountable and process your own failures? Because truthfully, the way we treat others is a reflection of how we feel about ourselves. How do you handle yourself? Are you the type of person sometimes when you go through a failure, now you lash out? Raise your hand by a show of hands who's ever said these words to somebody. You're just lashing out on me. You're using me as a punching bag. Am I the only one that's ever said that to somebody? That's ever had somebody in their life around them that every time they got upset, they started trying to beat up on, pick on them? I'm the only one?
No, you got the other two over
Just
there.
us? No, I'm talking to the crowd because all of y'all sitting out here, and then I want us to have some transparency. So no one's ever been in a situation where they've seen someone when they get upset, they start beating up on other people. And that's the tough part. That's the part that we don't want to say is that there's times where I contribute to this issue. I'm not saying that you're guilty of doing domestic violence, but to a certain degree, that's what it boils up to. And then you talk like we talk about, generational curses and what it is that we're seeing. Because all adults who perpetuate domestic violence were once children who had no place in domestic violence. And how did they learn how to handle their anger? And how did they learn how to process their failures? And how did they learn how to deal with their traumas? We have to also look at ourselves. There's the community needs to do things, the government needs to do things, policy needs to step in. But what is our place? How can we help out? Because then you learn how to handle your anger and remain in a place of calm and not lashing out on people. You're able to turn around and look at your brother or your cousin or your sister and your coworker and say, hey, you can handle that differently. There's a way, I get how you feel, but you don't have to go off on them like that. They didn't do nothing to you. And now you can speak to them with conviction because you've handled that yourself. Thank y'all for letting me share that.
Sometimes kids people allow other people to temperament draw us in, especially if we are not well within ourselves. So, say for instance, lashing out at Regina because you're upset for whatever reason, and let's say this gentleman here came up to you and told you you were out of line, directed your anger, your issue, cast it off on him. Well, he may not be well within himself emotionally as well, and he needs what you're, what you're bringing. And then here we are, have two well of people kids going at it because he's trying to stand up for Regina because of what you're projecting, but he truly can't stand up for her because he's brought in your negative energy.
I can't control their healthiness and their energy, but I can control mine. I can get myself to a place of healthiness. And I'm not saying you alone, you getting healthy is going to change the whole world, but it's a drop in the bucket. It's a drop in the bucket. And if everybody has this mentality that the little bit that I do isn't enough, nobody's going to do nothing. Like we talk about a community that helps out. Imagine a community where everyone knows how to handle anger and failure. You're healthy. Those things branch out. If you put 100 people around me, I might not change 100, but if I can get one, that's one more than there was before. But it always starts with myself.
That's what a lot of us.
And I am one of those people. I will be honest. I was trying to take the mic from him because I felt my toes stepped up a little bit. Because one of my favorite words is reciprocity. I'm gonna give you back what you give me. And that's not, and as good as I think that is not always the answer. Because if you are giving me negative, I should be a little bit more mature enough to walk away from that negative instead of saying, okay, you want to give negative? Okay, baby, here go your negative. That's a growth process for me. My toes hurt a little bit, but that's something that is involved in that mental health as well. Anger management. I don't feel like I need anger management. Some people might feel like I need anger management, but I feel like if I'm angry, y'all, that means I'm just giving back anger that I got from somebody. So, we have to reflect on ourselves and see where we are. But right now, he did lead into some things. The last thing that we're going to do is I have someone here to talk about getting prepared and staying prepared. Because there are some people in domestic violence situations, like you said, if his neighbor comes, y'all get out, escape now, come to my house. Getting prepared and staying prepared, so you can escape from that situation. So if Miss Kimberly can come up here for us and speak on that real quick.
Would you like me to?
Hello. Well, while anybody can be a victim or a survivor of criminal domestic violence, not everyone has the right or the same resources. So the community is very important to make sure that your community, our community, is doing everything that we can to make sure that people are safe or they're in safe situations. Because some communities don't provide the right resources. There are some barriers depending on who you are. And so it's just important that we do get involved in our community. I've been working I work for a company that we support Safe Harbor. Safe Harbor is a very, very good organization that helps. I know that I wanted to talk about Safe Harbor, but I also know that there are men that are abused as well. So anytime you find yourself or someone else that you know and love, you see something,
Say something.
because that shows how much you really care about that person. Like I could sit silent, but that's why a lot of things happen. Just sitting silent. So for men, there are resources for Greenville County, the city, and the county. Of course, you can call the victim hotline. And then for women, Safe Harbor. So if you call Safe Harbor, there's an 800 number. There will be an intake, so they'll let you know kind of everything that you need to do. But there's an intake form that you have to fill out. And then they will also help you do the paperwork for anything that you need to do. Yeah, for like a restraining order or anything that you need to do. Like you're never in it alone. There are classes that are provided. Sometimes there's housing that is provided. So just leaving a situation is the best thing that you can ever do. Get out of the situation. And then once you get out of the situation, trust that there are people that can help you stay out of the situation. Sometimes people will leave and then they will go back. Don't go back. You have to be fair to yourself. So I would always encourage you, if you are in a situation, even right now, speak to somebody about it. And if you are being spoken to about it, if you know something,
Say something.
Say something. You don't have to do it in a way that it would embarrass a person, but there are steps that you can take and processes that you can take to help the individual without hurting the public.
Thank you so much. So we're actually going to wrap up. We definitely still want your support throughout this process that we're doing. This is our first launch of Safety Net. We got a lot of work to do, and we will definitely be reaching out to each of you, thanking you. And hey, I want to say, as a matter of fact, thanking our donors. And please forgive me if I forget any of the donors. Hardwood Basketball Inc. donated our television. Thank you, Hardwood Basketball